Hello and welcome to this edition of Türkiye Talks. I am joined by Kadir Ustun and Ambassador Matthew Bryza. Welcome to our show.
Thanks, Bora. I'm really glad to be here with you and Kadir. I'm looking forward to our discussion.
Yeah, we are going to focus on Turkish-US relations. You know, it has been very deep, problematic years for the last maybe a decade or maybe more, but especially due to the problems in Syria, the PKK issue, S-400s, F-16s, F-35, lots of problems we have, but there is a kind of feeling in amongst circles something is about to change, or at least there is a will to change the relationship. Turkey are now in a different path, especially when it comes to its foreign policy in the Middle East. Now Turkey is talking to Israelis, Saudis, UAE. On the other hand, the Ukrainian crisis has changed a lot of things, especially when it comes to Turkey's attitude vis-a-vis Russia and Ukraine. I want to start with you, Ambassador Bryza. Do you think there is going to be a change, or at least there is a will of change in the air? What is your opinion about the recent situation in Turkish-US diplomacy?
In my opinion, Turkey has been signaling its desire for a positive change for quite some time. Certainly once Joseph Biden was declared the president, we saw a big turn in Turkish policy and de-escalation of Turkey asserting its claims, for example, in the Eastern Mediterranean, which had already sort of begun in the summer of 2020, when President Erdogan and TPAO decided not to explore for oil gas in the Eastern Mediterranean for a while. So Turkey began signaling there, would like to change the course of its then tense relationship with the US and the US's European allies. When Biden became president, we saw and heard even more signs that Turkey would like to normalize the relationship and improve it. And I recall how it was like in February, I think, of 2021, Defense Minister Akar started saying, well, let's negotiate a deal in fact, a comprehensive deal, but focused on the S-400 issue, and let's see what we can agree together. On the US side, there was no desire to change course. You'll recall that in December of 2020, then President Trump signed into law the National Defense Authorization Act, which, number one, required him to place sanctions on Turkey for the S-400 purchase, and number two, took away any right to lift that ban by the US president as long as the S-400 missiles remained in Turkey. So things started out with a misalignment of desires and intentions, with Turkey ready to get back on track, the Trump administration saying we're not going to get back on track as long as the S-400s are there, and then Secretary of State designate Tony Blinken during his confirmation hearing referred to Turkey as a so-called strategic partner. And that was after, during the election campaign, then candidate Joe Biden had said he would favor a change in the government of Turkey, albeit through elections. So on the US side, things started off really rough. And, Donald Trump had a special relationship with President Erdogan. So by definition, when Trump left and there was any new president, things were going to be a little bit rougher in US-Turkey relations. But they got off to a really rough start with those statements by both Biden and Blinken. Now, more recently, and Turkey's, if you will, strategic brand in Washington was toxic. There was such a deep misunderstanding of Turkey's objectives, of how Turkey was behaving. There was this crazy misunderstanding that because Turkey favors eliminating the Ypg terrorist threat in Syria, that means Turkey is somehow attacking all Kurds. Those attitudes are still out there in Washington, but what is beginning to change is that there is an increasing appreciation for how important Turkey's role is in supporting Ukraine right now, especially with the Bayraktar drones, but not only. Even while Turkey avoids harsh rhetoric toward Russia that allows Turkey possibly to play a mediator's role. And so with Ukraine now, I think there's a possibility that the attitudes in Washington will now improve toward Turkey.
Kadir, what is your take on that? Do you think it's only Ukraine, or there is a bigger need? I'm going to talk about, maybe you can talk about the energy issue related to Russia-Ukraine crisis and European energy security, maybe. What is your opinion on that?
Well, I don't think it's only Ukraine. In the US-Turkey relationship, I think that there are always some opportunities for new openings and putting the relationship on the right track. But there has been some one or two key issues that has been pulling down everything else, and one of them is, of course, the Ypg issue. It's a national security threat for Turkey, and Turkey cannot simply walk away from that matter. It is somewhat, managed right now because US is not increasing its support for this organization, but it's not a resolved issue, and it is an outstanding issue. And then the other thing was, like Ambassador Bryza mentioned, the S-400 matter created a lot of tensions in the defense relationship, and that has been quote-unquote overcome with the American sanctions at the end of Trump administration. But I think the thinking about Turkey has begun to change partly after Afghanistan, U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan. Turkey played a crucial role there, constructive role. It continues to sort of, deal with the administration in Kabul about, the airport, etc. And these are just few Ukraine and Afghanistan are just two examples. But when you look at the map and the issue areas, conflict areas, Libya, Syria, Caucasus, Russia, Iran, even Lebanon and Yemen, Turk and European security, immigration. I mean, you count these top 10 issues in world's agenda, Turkey is going to be relevant in most of them, if not all of them. So that always, I think, in my mind, will provide opportunities for US and Turkey, Turkish and American leaderships to try to create some positive agenda. As you mentioned at the beginning, there have been many problems in the past decade, largely because of regional issues, but there have been also bilateral issues. But we keep coming back to the need for both countries to work together because of what I just said, right? Top 10 foreign policy items of both countries, they're relevant, right? They're important for each other. So that keeps pushing the relationship to a certain level of coordination and cooperation, even though there are burning issues, the problem areas that need to be resolved. But the two countries cannot be just talking about Ypg and then S-400 all day long and not talk about anything else. And Ukraine crisis has shown that very clearly. Turkey's role, like Ambassador Bryza mentioned, was seen very toxic in Washington for a while, partly because it became a domestic political issue. Trump had good relations with Russia, good relations with Turkey, so Trump was bad, and whoever was next to him was bad. So it was almost as simplified, overly simplified as that. But of course, for a more thoughtful, complex national security discussion, that's just way too simplistic. And I think there's been recognition of this. Biden administration has been working at the institutional level and through the multilateral venues, forums like NATO, to make sure that Turkey is engaged. But we probably need a bit more than that. We need more conversations, bilateral conversations between the two presidents to create a more, let's say, constructive agenda and more sort of critically important cooperation areas need to be pushed forward.
Bora, may I comment on that briefly?
Yeah, please.
So I completely agree with Kadir that all of those areas that Kadir mentioned are important to the U.S. and are possible areas where the U.S. and Turkey could restore a sense of strategic cooperation. But that is not happening now, because it's not President Biden that controls this agenda that's causing the problems. It's the Congress, which means these are political issues that have to be resolved, and political opposition that has to be resolved inside the Congress. And so what I'm saying is the one issue that I see now, the only one of all of those Kadir mentioned, that can overcome the political opposition to Turkey for all sorts of domestic U.S. reasons is Ukraine. And then I hope that once that cooperation is fully appreciated, then we'll see the political class beyond the specialists at the State Department, but the political class in Washington agree with what we three totally agree. To resolve these issues and manage them well, Turkey is indispensable. Right now, only a very small number of people in Washington see things that way.
The thing is, during the last couple of years, the image of Turkey has been very problematic in the U.S. We know because of the lobbies from different political groups connected with Turkey or with other countries. What I don't understand really, is it really difficult to see Turkey's goals or Turkey's objectives in the region? I'm trying to say that how much do you think Turkish-U.S. relations, Turkish-U.S. interests are conflicting? Because when we look at the last couple of years, Turkey is maybe the only country which limited Russian influence in the region, in Libya, in Syria, in Karabakh. Also, Turkey limited Iran's intentions in the region. So I think these are what the United States wanted to do. I don't understand why. Okay, we have the S-400 issue, which is a real. Maybe Trump caused a lot of damage because of its relationship with Turkish president. So Turkey became a domestic problem. So do you think this is going to change, and how real the conflicting interests of Turkey and U.S. and do we really need Ukrainian crisis for the U.S. to understand the importance of Turkey right now?
Yes, we do. That's my entire point. Turkey remains a toxic brand in Washington. Overall, Turkey is seen as a problem to be managed rather than a partner with which to manage problems. That is the view. It's unfair. It's largely due to lobbying, but not only. So in the case of Syria, as I mentioned in the beginning, the conventional wisdom, even among very sophisticated people in think tanks and journalists, the conventional wisdom is wrong, but it is that YPG is just and DYP, they're just Kurdish political group or militia fighting to protect the Kurds and supported by Syria's Kurds. People in Washington don't understand what the DYP and the YPG are. This is a Marxist-Leninist cult that seeks to build an independent state carved out of Turkish and Syrian and Iraqi territory that uses terrorism. When I say something like that in Washington, most people tune out and they say, you're pro-Turkish. Yeah, YPG, they're not terrorists. But they are. So one problem is the conventional wisdom is that Turkey is killing Kurds who just want their independence. Wrong, but that's the view. when it comes, so then that makes it difficult for people in Washington to appreciate what Turkey did in stopping Russian forces in Idlib, who were slaughtering innocent civilians and Turkish soldiers back in February of 2020. All that gets filtered out. Then you have Azerbaijan. From my perspective, the US and France created a political vacuum in Azerbaijan on the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict when they failed to respond as the Minsk group to the border clashes between Azerbaijan and Armenia in July of 2020. Turkey filled the vacuum, Russia filled the vacuum. Great that Turkey is there as a NATO ally, but in Washington, that all happened against the backdrop of Turkey's tensions with Greece in the Eastern Mediterranean. So Greek Americans and Greek politicians, and therefore all of the EU, because of EU solidarity, especially Macron and France, were able to say, Washington, Turkey's being aggressive. Look what it's doing to our innocent, Greek ally. The Greeks are in line with international law in the Eastern Mediterranean because they signed the Law of the Sea Convention. Turkey did not. Turkey's being aggressive in the Eastern Mediterranean and is now being aggressive in Azerbaijan. I could go on and on. These are all incorrect analyses from my perspective, but they've created intellectual pollution in Washington. And the clear alignment of the US and Turkey's strategic interests can't penetrate that fog of the strategic or of these operational concerns that block out the strategic alignment that both of our countries have. So again, the misalignment of the US and Turkey is political. It's not based on underlying strategic interests, which do align. And so the politics must change in Washington. And again, I'll say for the third time, I don't see any other issue on the agenda that is sufficiently politically significant and creates unity between both Democrats and Republicans other than Ukraine, where Turkey's playing a huge role.
Well, Kadir, what would you like to add on that?
Well, I would agree with most of it. On the strategic, it's true. I mean, there are these frameworks that have been repeated so many times, partly because of domestic politics, partly because, Turkish leadership, at some point, a former, US ambassador had said to Turkish media, we don't like you because you tell the truth. Sometimes that happens too, and what I get from that is there aren't actually many countries who are just trying to design their own foreign policy. And that's been the case for Turkey past 2 decades. Turkey has understood that it is part of alliance systems, no question, NATO. It wants to be part of EU. It is already integrated so much with the Europe economically and otherwise. So these are all good and well, but when regional uncertainty hits, instability hits, there's actual security problems, we are kind of on our own. Not totally, that's not what I mean, but we need to design our own foreign policy. And that was the first, I would say that lesson was taught all the way back in 1991 with the first Iraq war, because that created in the 90s a huge, influx of about 500,000, I believe, refugees into Turkey. Some of them were recruited by the PKK, and 90s were really terrible years in terms of PKK terrorism. I'm not equating at all, refugees with, terrorism at all, but that's what happened in the 90s. And then 2003, Turkey, understood that this wasn't wise. Invasion of Iraq, it opposed it, but then it was helpful to the US later to make sure that Turkey's interests were protected. Long story short, many things that have developed over time, over the past 2 decades, Turkey is trying to set its own foreign policy agenda. And there aren't many countries who do that. And sometimes when you do that, you're at odds with bigger players, be it US, be it Russia, be it China and others. So that creates friction, and sometimes you can't manage it, and there's fallouts. And then, those crises especially increase with the Arab Spring, right? At the beginning, US and Turkey were on the same page, but eventually it became a very toxic situation. And then that problem has festered. And now we have an ongoing problem in northern Syria, but it's being managed largely because Turkey is there and it feels more secure about its own border security. But it doesn't mean it is, resolved, as I mentioned earlier. So the point is, Bora, I agree with you. There is like conflicting interests often because Turkey is trying to set its own foreign policy. And sometimes that creates frictions and tensions. For a superpower great power like the US policy community, it's not easy to kind of identify with Turkey's priorities. They are running from one crisis to another, and they don't, some of them at least don't want to put themselves in the shoes of Turkey and trying to understand Turkey's priorities. So that's kind of the nature of the beast in some ways. But like Ukraine crisis, like Afghanistan, when direct US national security interests are concerned and they're threatened, and Turkey comes through with its own capacity and capabilities and diplomatic, and military power to come and help and play a constructive role, that's when US policy makers will recognize it. But turning it into a political, acceptance and celebration, even promotion, that's a whole other story. Like Ambassador is saying, because of that history, a lot of politicians are hesitant to publicly maybe promote Turkey and talk about Turkey's promotions. They are more careful or hesitant about that, unfortunately.
Yeah, when we look at from this point to the future, what can we expect from Turkey and US to a positive way? The energy issue of Europe can be resolved by including Turkey. Obviously, Turkey can provide the safest and most stable route and shortest and cheapest to Europe, probably, if the new energy source becomes Gulf region. So this is one thing. Maybe you can comment on that. Should Turkey expect a positive attitude from the US in purchasing weapons or modernizing or buying new airplanes, like F-16's issue is on the way? There will be new visits from Turkey. So in the short run, what should we expect, or should we expect anything to the positive direction?
Well, if things keep going well for US-Turkey relations in Ukraine, then there's a chance, and I hope a likelihood, but still only a chance, that the F-16 deal will go through. So 2 months ago, that was stuck. The deal whereby Turkey would take the $1.3 billion it had already spent on the F-35 and use that to acquire new F-16s and upgrades to the F-16s that Turkey already owns. That was going nowhere a couple of months ago because it just faced too much opposition in the Congress because of all the attitudes, incorrect as they may be, that we already discussed. Now, more recently, as they observed how crucial Turkey's help has been to Ukraine, 3 of the 4 key members in the US Senate, who will really kind of drive the decision, 3 of those 4 now say, we support the US State Department's suggestion that the US sell these F-16s and the upgrade packages to Turkey. But one, the chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, Robert Menendez, who, by the way, blocked my nomination as ambassador to Azerbaijan until President Obama circumvented that, he's still saying no. And if he blocks it, it can't go forward. That deal won't happen. But of course, politics is politics. So if President Biden decides he wants to spend some of his political capital in persuading the chairman of this key committee in the Senate to approve this sale of F-16s to Turkey, then it will happen. So then it gets to the question of F-35s. There is no chance that the US government, whether it be the executive branch or the Congress, will change that law that imposed sanctions on Turkey as long as the S-400s are in Turkey, unless the S-400s go someplace else. So I know President Erdogan's been very clear that the S-400s are in Turkey to stay, but the law is what it says in the US. So if President Biden really decided he cares about this relationship with Turkey so much that he wants to have that law changed, he'll have to argue and persuade the Congress. I mean, we know how it is here in Turkey, right? I mean, democracy is a democracy, and the president doesn't just say this is what's going to happen and it happens. In the U.S., it's a huge battle, and Biden's domestic agenda of economic assistance to people who are suffering from the results of the pandemic and supply chain disruptions, much of it did not pass because even though his party, the Democratic Party, controls both houses of Congress, he couldn't get majorities to support his own package by his own party. The same goes for Turkey and the F-35 S-400 problems. So please don't be disappointed, Turkey. Please don't expect when your expectations of a sudden change in US-Turkey relations doesn't happen. It's going to take a lot of work and some time and may not come through when it comes to F-35s and F-16s. On energy, I've been at the center of US-Turkish cooperation on bringing Caspian energy to Turkey and Europe since 1998. And we achieved a lot with Baku-Tbilisi-Ceyhan on oil, with the South Caucasus gas pipeline that now is the Southern Corridor. And much more can be done. Now that Turkey has wisely invested in liquid natural gas terminals, it can import a lot of natural gas from the US, from Qatar, from Nigeria, Algeria, Mozambique soon, and then use that at home and also help it move to other countries, even Ukraine. The problem is there's not enough natural gas in the world right now to be able to, put it this way, replace the 155 billion cubic meters of Russian gas that Europe says it doesn't want to take anymore. If you take all the liquid natural gas that's available and all the other supply sources we can think of, we could maybe get to about 50, maybe 55 billion cubic meters. So Turkey can play that important role in helping Europe get gas that's not Russian, but Turkey can't solve the problem. There needs to be more gas to take advantage of Turkey's pipelines, storage facility, and regasification terminals. But I think Turkey, if it does work together with its NATO allies and with Ukraine to bring whatever gas can be found in the international market into Europe, I think that will also significantly raise Turkey's strategic profile. And I've been talking about that with very senior officials here in Ankara during this visit.
Do you think also Turkey should do more lobbying in the US, maybe in order to influence the Congress people there? Because in Turkey, we are discussing with our friends and other experts that in that area, Turkey is not strong enough to influence, especially Congress people. What do you think Turkey should do there?
Oh, it definitely needs to do a lot more lobbying and better lobbying. You can't succeed in lobbying if the approach is to say, these are Turkey's interests. The US should share these interests, and therefore the US needs to cooperate with Turkey. That'll never work. What will work, I think, is if Turkey, explains gently, even emotionally, how it sees the Eastern Mediterranean, for example, how it's not true that one side is completely in compliance with international law and Turkey is out of compliance, because that's not true. There are many ways to interpret international law and international maritime law. So Turkey just needs to come out in a non-defensive way and just say, well, wait a second. Yeah, we understand that's the Greek or Greek Cypriot perspective, but here's our perspective and it's equally legitimate. So that's one form the lobbying could take. And I think Turkey could spend a lot more time helping people just understand Turkey. Turkey has a great advertising campaign right now that I watch a lot on CNN. It's focused largely on Istanbul, and it's all about how exciting Istanbul is, its food, its culture, and then the nature of Turkey. Turkish Airlines does a fantastic job now in promoting the brand of Turkey for tourism, not in geostrategic ways. So there needs to be a lot more of that, and then a lot more people-to-people exchanges. So members of the Congress and their staffs bring as many of them as possible to Turkey to get to see what Turkey really is, to get to know what Turkish hospitality is, to get to know what customer service is in Turkey. Customer service in the United States is horrible. And customer service is better in Turkey than almost anywhere I've ever been. So just get the Americans to come here and experience Turkey, and I think we'll start to see the attitudes change.
Kadir, what do you think will happen? Do you have any positive expectations between Turkey and US, especially this F-16 issue Mr. Ambassador explained? What is your opinion on that?
So F-16, normally there should be no question because this is a NATO country, and F-16s were sold to Turkey from by the US. Turkey has been using them effectively for a long time. So in the ideal world, there should not be even a question. And the sanctions against Turkey due to the S-400 purchase was, if you remember Pompeo's remarks about it, they were meant to punish Russia, not Turkey. And it, of course, had implications for Turkey through sanctions, but administration pushed Turkey out of the F-35 system and imposed sanctions. So the S-400 issue was sort of should be out of the discussion when it comes to F-16s because Turkey already has borne the brunt of the sanctions and it got already punished for that, let's say, quote unquote. When it comes to F-16, it's all about maintaining the capacity of a fellow NATO member. And basically, there is no threat to the F-35 program from acquiring F-16s. It has nothing to do with, S-400. It's a completely separate track. So these are rational arguments that Turkey is already making. But like the ambassador mentioned, there are some senators who are dead set against anything that is related to Turkey sometimes, and it's often driven by their constituencies and their politics. I hope it can be overcome. The administration can convince such senators through perhaps offering them other things that are valuable to their constituency and their politics. So, as I said, there shouldn't have been even a question about F-16, but we are where we are. At least it is something positive to talk about, and I'm hoping it will go through, but it may not go through right away because elections are coming up, midterms are in the US in November. That will probably, I don't think Menendez is up for re-election, but still, it does have an impact on that. But I think the Ukraine issue has the potential to kind of bring the two sides together. Turkey has played a positive role so far, but it also has the potential to push the countries apart. Let's be realistic about that, because right now the US policy is basically give full support to Ukraine against Russia for protection of their country. How far is that going to go, right? If Zelensky wants to retrieve all Ukrainian lands, invaded by Russia, that will take a long time. And Turkey is advocating a much swifter resolution of the war and some sort of agreement between the two sides. Of course, Turkey cannot push the sides. They have to want to end this conflict. So it's not in Turkey's hands, but there is some difference in policy emphasis and nuances between U.S. policy and Turkey policy. But at the same time, Washington is careful not to show friction within the NATO alliance, and Turkey is a NATO country. So they want Turkey on their side, and they appreciate Turkey's help to Ukraine. And Turkey was one of the most vocal countries about, illegal invasion of the country, and since 2014 against Crimea. And Turkey, gave material support to Ukraine. It's probably still giving some support on that front, and has good relations with both countries. Long story short, I think it comes down to politics, like Ambassador mentioned. If the leadership on both sides want to make something good out of these opportunities, these crises that create these opportunities, then they would be able to do it. It requires a lot of work, but it is needed in such an unstable environment we are living in, right? It's hard to get European allies to agree on things, right? Nothing is given these days. You can't take any country for granted when it comes to, creating common cause with them, cooperate with them. So I'm still hopeful. I'm on the positive side of things. In the next year, I would like to see more cooperation and unity on the Ukrainian front, especially at the political and diplomatic levels, because the end game, the end goal for Ukraine will ultimately be decided by the Ukrainians. There's no question about that. But how can the US and Turkey cooperate in supporting Ukraine and trying to find a solution to the war? So other than that, there's energy, like you mentioned, there's Middle East issues. There are many areas that they can cooperate, but there will need to be some more stronger political will on both sides, I think.
Before we close, I want to ask Mr. Ambassador's opinion about Ukrainian crisis, because it's a defining problem. It defines alliances, it defines the region, global politics, future of Russia, future of Black Sea, future of the Caucasus, which these are the areas that you are interested in. It seems that the conflict is turning to a protracted conflict, but how do you see the Ukrainian-Russian crisis? Where do you think it's going right now? Do you think Russia will end its aggression soon, or, as I said, do you think it's going to be a protracted conflict which will last for years, maybe?
I think it will be protracted. I think it's great if Turkey is available as a mediator, but I don't think, well, just as Kadir was saying, Ukraine's going to decide what its own destiny is, and it's not looking for a mediator now. It was earlier, and Putin was not. And so Putin started to lose, and then he started talking about mediation, and now he says he's not interested. I think he's going to start talking about mediation again soon, because the Russian military is really being defeated on the battlefield, and it's so humiliating for Russia, because the one thing that the world respected, maybe in a negative way, about Russia was its military, and its military has proved to be, what do you call it, a colossus with feet of clay. And that's due to massive corruption, lack of maintenance, no morale among the troops, no planning or inefficient planning, inability to integrate combined arms operations. They can't get the air, land, and sea forces to work together in a proper way. And frankly, that is totally the way Russian organizations work. They have maybe great technology and a grand big idea, but look at Russian cars as they've been made throughout the years. They're not great vehicles. The maintenance and doing the little things that Turks are great at in terms of engineering and maintenance, and Americans, Russians don't do that. So their military has been eaten out by those problems and by corruption. So Ukraine is not going to lose on the battlefield. However, the huge wild card is, will Putin escalate to the use of weapons of mass destruction? Will he use chemical weapons, and will he maybe use a battlefield nuclear weapon? And I would say nobody on earth knows the answer to that question, not even Vladimir Putin right now. If he were to use either of those weapons, though, I think we would see, maybe, I don't know for sure, but we would see some NATO member states getting directly involved and attacking Russian troops on the ground in Ukraine. Maybe not under a NATO umbrella, but they would get involved. It could be they'll start with a humanitarian no-fly zone in Western Ukraine, which will lead to clashes with Russian Air Force, or it could be direct attacks on Russian forces. But I think if Putin doesn't use weapons of mass destruction, then he will have to find a way to declare victory, occupying maybe Donbass and Luhansk, with the Ukrainian side doing what they had proposed when Turkey was mediating a couple of weeks ago, with Ukraine saying, okay, we can say we're not going to join NATO, we can say we're going to remain neutral geostrategically, and we can even say we'll determine, or we can negotiate on the future status of Donetsk and Luhansk, maybe in 15 years. That is a way forward, and that is what Turkey was helping to engineer in terms of a solution, but then Putin gave up. So I think for now, Putin wants to see if he can't consolidate Russian control of Donetsk and Luhansk, and then maintain that land bridge from Russia through Donbass and Mariupol all the way to Crimea, and then beyond. I mean, Putin's goal now, because he utterly failed at the first goal, which was to topple the government in Kiev, now he wants to restore what Russians refer to as Novaya Rossiya, which comes from Catherine the Great's time, areas along the entire southern coast of Ukraine and Moldova that were annexed by the Russian Empire in the 18th century. So that's like the second level, but still very ambitious set of goals that Putin has. It's not clear if he'll be able to achieve them. My last comment is, if he achieves, however, a goal as large as that, I think he will keep going. He will go after Moldova. He will go after Georgia, which, you know, much of which 20% is already occupied by Russian troops. And if the rest of us don't stand up and stop it, he will challenge NATO in the Baltic states. So he needs to be stopped. And I'm praying he'll be stopped without him using weapons of mass destruction. But everything I've laid out, that suggests a protracted conflict.
Yeah. So let's hope that Turkey and US understands each other in a better way, so they can contribute to the stability and peace in the region. Thank you very much, Ambassador Bryza, Kadir Ustun. Teşekkürler.
Thank you, Bora.
With this, we came to the end of Türkiye Talks. Hope to see you next week.